Bonjour à tout le monde. Je pense qu'on peut commencer le webinaire.
All right, good morning, everyone. I think we can get started, and I should like to welcome you all to this seminar entitled Bringing Solutions to Scale, Improving Information on the Food Situation. This is organized by the OECD Secretariat. The reason we're meeting, I mean, this is a critical time for the region. We are marked by a degrading food situation in spite of all the investment efforts, all the food response efforts made by the various countries. This webinar is part of the RPCA network, the CILSS, ECOWAS, and UMEO. The partners propose to see what new innovative governance tools could be used, how could bring about more inclusive solutions to include regional partnerships and arrive at more resilient food systems. I would like to thank you for coming, for attending these sessions, and without further ado, I will give the floor to Mrs. Nana Touré, who is head of the Sahel Club and West Africa countries at OECD. You have the floor, madam. Well, thank you so very much. Thank you, CD. And I would like to welcome you all to this webinar entitled Bringing Solutions to Scale, Improving Scaling existing tools and partnerships to improve food security in governance. My name is Madame Touré. I'm in charge of West Africa and this, the Sahel and West Africa Club at OECD. It's a pleasure to welcome you here. As you know, the real challenges we're facing in terms of food insecurity are as follows. Number one, we find it sometimes a challenge to prevent food crises. There's a limited amount of what we can do, and then the measures taken are not necessarily based on evidence-based solutions, and this means that also if there's less coordination with other partners, there are fewer synergies and less effectiveness. And also, what we haven't got is an inclusive commercial approach to promote agricultural growth, to promote other ways and means to create new forms of livelihood for the population while working on food security. We'll be discussing this with experts, members of the panel, but I would like to emphasize three messages. Number one, it is essential to build management and prevention capacities to address food insecurity. If you want to achieve food security, nutritional security, countries must be better prepared to address and respond to crises. Right now, that means scaling, as I said, existing and approved practices, but also better regional support to have early warning systems, more efficient early warning systems. We need to have programming and implementation tools to have a more focused response and have a better way to manage the response and the performance of response tools. The other issue is that the effect on food security is not consistent. What we need is targeted policies, efficient coordination, and evidence-based action. And I'll give you an illustration of this. Food insecurity has been growing in Sahel and West Africa, even though food production has increased. Over the past years, the West Africa and Sahel region saw per capita food production increase, and yet 30 million additional people suffered food insecurity over the past 5 years. And the third big message here is that responsible investment targeting impoverished populations are a real incentive to improve collective and social well-being. The scaling up of inclusive business models make it possible to reduce marginalization of vulnerable populations, making the food system more accessible, and of course, directly beneficial to vulnerable groups. Cooperation between decision makers, the private sector, and international partners is essential if we are to stimulate agricultural growth, but also to promote livelihood, to find solutions for food security on a sustainable basis. If I may, dear participants, dear panelists, we will present the program for the next couple of hours. We have a panelist, Issoufa Bawa, who is head of the Agromet Center of CILSS, and he'll introduce regional initiatives in terms of food crisis prevention, integrated and comprehensive response, emphasizing governance tools used for food security, as well as what is known as the Nexus approach. Then we have Mrs. Bencia Stefan Kaya, who is the regional coordinator of the FAO Office of West Africa. She will highlight the role of social protection in addressing food insecurity, and indeed the role of governments and the new solutions proposed for social protection. Mrs. Cecilia Garcia Nazala, who is head of cooperation with Africa, the Arab world, and Asia at ACID, which is the Spanish Agency for International Cooperation for Development. She will present the new partnership models and strategies indispensable to improve prevention and coordinate action. Mr. Konrad Rhein, who is the Secretary General of the World Initiative for Food Security. He will address the political framework needed to encourage the resilience of food systems, especially in vulnerable or underinvested areas. Then we have Mr. Philippe Thomas, who is head of the Food Crisis Department, who's head of the resilience systems at the European Union. He will see how investment and inclusion can come together to improve the position on food security. Then we have Dr. Jean-Pierre Senghor, who is the former Executive Secretary of National Council for Food Security in Senegal. He will share with us some specific examples, the challenges encountered by the various countries, as well as action plans for scaling. Then we have Mr. Hamed Benan, who is a representative of CONOCELS in Mauritania. He will also present those solutions proposed for food security in the continuity of the Senegalese example. And then we'll have a final theme for the panel and see how this will relate to specific commitments and partnerships. What is being done to improve food security in the Sahel region and in West Africa. We'll have a hands-on approach there. The moderator will be Mr. Sévignon, who is the manager in charge of the programs of the Sahel and West Africa Club. We are honored to have you all here on this panel. Now, having had this discussion, we'll have a Q&A session, a 20-minute Q&A session, and we invite you to send your comments using the chat, and please include your name and institution if you wish to use the chat. I would like to thank you all for joining us in Seville and around the world. And without further ado, I will give the floor to Mr. Sévignon, who will moderate this session. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Directrice.
Well, thank you, Madam, and I will
Merci beaucoup
be
encore pour cette
moderating
excellente
this
introduction qui est
session. Many thanks for
à
this
mettre en lumière les enjeux
introduction. We
essentiels
know
de ce
you have
webinaire.
set the stage, as it
Merci
were, for this
également
panel
pour la
discussion,
clarté
and
et la
thank you for
pertinence
presenting
de vos
things
messages ainsi que
so
la présentation
clearly,
très
and
soignée de nos panélistes. Alors,
and
je
thank
vais
you for
commencer par
introducing all
entrer au
members of the
sujet
panel.
avec
I
une
will
toute petite présentation.
start the presentation. Well,
Je
I'll
ne sais
start
pas
the
si vous
session with a
voyez mon
very
écran.
short presentation. I hope you can see my screen. It is being shared as we speak.
D'accord. Donc, juste pour
Right
camper le
then,
sujet,
so just to
une
set
petite
the stage,
présentation qui
a
va
brief presentation
passer en revue rapidement la
where we
situation
will
alimentaire au
review
niveau de la
the
région
food
et
situation
poser trois
in
défis
the
majeurs.
Sahel and West
Et
Africa
parmi ces
region.
trois défis majeurs,
And we have
quelques sont des
three
solutions
major
que nous sommes en
challenges
train
and
d'explorer
two
au niveau du SWAC.
avenues being
Donc, comme vous
explored
savez sans doute, la
at the
situation alimentaire s'est
Sahel
beaucoup
Club.
détériorée
As you know, the
dans
food
les
situation has
10-5 dernières années.
deteriorated over
On
the
note une
past 5 to
accélération
10
vraiment de
years.
l'insécurité
There's
alimentaire
a
liée à plusieurs facteurs combinés.
an acceleration of food insecurity. This is
L'insécurité,
due to a number
les
of
chocs
factors.
économiques,
There's
les chocs
insecurity, economic
climatiques
shocks, there's the climate
combinés
effects, and
qui
all
vraiment
these
font que
effects
cette
combined
situation s'est
has
détériorée de
have led
façon
to
rapide.
this
Et sur
very
la
degraded
période des
situation.
5 dernières
And if you
années,
look at the
nous
period
avons
over the
environ
past
30 millions de
5
personnes
years,
additionnelles
you
qui
have
sont en
an
difficulté
additional
alimentaire
30
multiple.
million people
Bien
who
sûr,
find
il y a
themselves
le
in a
nombre
situation of
de
food
populations
insecurity
organisées qui a
and stress. Of
fortement
course,
augmenté,
the
mais en
population
valeur
has
relative aussi, nous sommes
grown,
passés de
but
3 à
even
7%
in
de la
relative numbers,
population analysée
we've
percevant
moved
une
from
situation
3 to
de crise
7% of the
alimentaire.
population facing
Alors,
a
euh,
food crisis.
trois challenges
So
principaux. Le
there are
premier, c'est
the three main
vraiment
challenges are
des
are
systèmes
follows.
de réponse qui
First,
sont
the response
réactifs plutôt que
systems are
préventifs. Et
responsive,
l'enjeu,
indeed, rather
c'est
than
vraiment comment
preventive.
aller plus vers la
And they have
prévention.
to be, well, we have to move
Et dans
towards
ça, investir dans la
prevention,
capacité des pays à
and
mieux
so
prévenir
invest in the
et à
country's
gérer les crises
ability
essentielles.
better to prevent
Pour plusieurs raisons.
crises.
La
And there's a
première,
number
c'est
of
que
reasons for
en
this.
termes de coût
Number one, in
monétaire,
terms of
$1
cost,
investi dans la
$1
prévention
invested in
permet
prevention
de
makes it
sauvegarder
possible
et
to
réduire des pertes ou de
reduce
générer des revenus additionnels de
losses,
$7. Il y
or
a
indeed
quelques
generate
études
a
qui l'ont
revenue to the
montré.
tune of
Et
$7. For $1 invested, there's a
travailler
gain
dans
of
la
$7. A
prévention au
very
niveau
good
global
ratio. And if
permet
you
de réduire les
expand
coûts de
this
l'assistance alimentaire dans le
regionally, then
monde
you can
de
reduce
presque 5
the
milliards de dollars
cost
par
of
année.
food
Et pour donner une
aid to the tune
estimation
of
sur
$5
la base
billion a year. That's a huge
du
savings.
coût
And just to give you an
la
order
durée
of
de
magnitude,
ménage
if you
en
look
Afrique de l'Ouest, c'est
uh,
environ 13 millions de personnes
at the number of people, you have about
additionnelles qui pourraient être
an
assistées
additional
par ce
13
montant
million
pendant au
people
moins 4
who
mois.
could be helped
Et
if
l'autre aspect,
such a
c'est
system
vraiment
is
dans
introduced,
la
just
prévention
with that
également.
savings alone.
La question
And
de
then
la
another thing,
maximisation
there's
de
the issue
l'impact de
of
chaque dollar qui est
maximizing the
investi
impact
dans
of
la
every
sécurité
dollar
alimentaire et
invested
nutritionnelle.
in
Beaucoup d'évidences ont montré que la
food
prévention,
and
la
nutritional
résilience et les investissements dans les
system.
systèmes
So
locaux
if
de
you invest
production
in local food production
sont très
systems, we
efficients
find that these small-scale
sur le long
investments
terme.
turn out to be
En lieu et
highly
place
efficient in
d'interventions
the long run, rather
d'urgence
than having
humanitaire
humanitarian response
qui
actions
permettent
uh,
d'appuyer les
which
populations
may
sur une petite période,
address
mais qui ne
the
sont
needs of a
pas
population over a
suffisamment
very short period of
transformatrices.
time. But that's not
Une intervention
transformative.
sur le long
Instead of
terme
having
permet
that,
vraiment
a
de changer
long-term
la vie des
investment
populations,
can
de les
turn
sortir de l'insécurité alimentaire et
the life around
devenir beaucoup plus
for the
efficace.
populations
Et
there.
bien
It's a
sûr,
much more
derrière, il y a
effective,
aussi tous
efficient way
les
of
modèles,
working. And then
certains modèles
you have
d'intervention, en tout cas, qui peuvent être
well,
questionnés.
there are
Ici, vous
some
avez une
intervention
illustration.
models that
Si vous
are
achetez une
questionable.
tonne
An example here: if you
de céréales
purchase
en
one
dehors du
ton
continent
of
africain, vous le
grain
mettez dans un
outside
bateau
the African
qui peut
continent, you put it
distribuer en
on a
Afrique,
boat,
ça
and
coûte six
then
fois plus
you
cher que
sell
si
it
vous
to, or you
appuyez un
distribute it
producteur
in Africa,
à
it's 6 times more
produire
expensive than if you had a
ces
local
tonnes de
producer
céréales supplémentaires.
producing these
Donc, juste
additional
pour
tons
vous
of
montrer une
grain. So just to
illustration,
give you
il
an
y a lieu
illustration right
également
there,
vraiment de
local
travailler
production is a
sur le long
lot
terme
cheaper, much more
pour
cost
mieux
efficient
prévenir et
than
investir sur
exporting or
la
importing rather
sécurité, sur la
the
prévention.
foodstuffs.
Et
So
c'est la raison pour laquelle,
again,
au niveau
prevention
du
is certainly
RPCA, avec le
much more
CIRS, nous avons
worthwhile
vraiment
than
travaillé sur un
ex post
instrument qui
response.
permet aux
So
countries
we are looking
de
at the kind of
pouvoir faire
investments
son
that can
propre
enable
diagnostic,
countries to have
d'identifier
their
les gaps
own
en termes de
diagnosis. They can
capacité
identify their needs in terms of capacity, in terms of prevention, but also helping countries define the type of actions needed to and policies needed to build the prevention capacity and crisis management. We have this tool set up. It's been digitalized, and it will be made available soon to all countries. The second factor is, of course, the efficiency of response. As I said, the response is insufficiently transformative, not really efficient at all, because year on year, what you find is that food insecurity is only growing, is only getting worse. So there are various reasons for that. I mean, the resources are limited. I mean, there are resources, but the programs are resource-based rather than need-based. Then we find that the response packages, as I said, are not transformative enough. And then you have limited resources that can save lives for a short period of time, but this is not related, or it's not linked to a sort of sustainable, long-lasting solution. So these are one-off actions that are not efficient over the long run. And then the other issue is that you have many scattered responses, a sort of silo system which with little coordination, and that makes for a less effective operation on the ground. And then the last factor, and of course, that should be considered an aspect of donor fatigue or a lack of visibility or accountability on the part of political authorities that do invest quite a bit, but then the return on that investment is very negative indeed. The food situation simply does not improve, because here we're looking at an output-based versus a performance-based system. And so then we can't really see how effective the systems are. So there are lots of resources mobilized, but then yet the effect is very limited. Between 2012 and 2022 on our platform, on our RCPA platform, we found as many as 1,200 projects, a budget of $51 million, and yet there's much more to do. So in terms of synergies, there are lots of savings in terms of coordination. We could make these projects much more cost effective. And so, and it is for that reason that we have a monitoring group, a working party that addresses these strategic issues. And together with the Sahel and West Africa Club and CILSS, that group helps countries provides countries with new programming instruments, really innovative instruments that will enable them to have a much more precise profile of their food needs, but also this helps countries adopt the nexus approach and indeed come up with responses that will indeed meet the needs identified. Also, this will make it possible to map the possible synergies, the kind of coordinations that should and could be implemented to optimize the effect of these responses. And indeed, a lot of work is being done as we speak. And by way of conclusion, saying we're working on programming, but we're also working on the response manual. And on this platform that is now being made available, all these issues of synergies and coordination are being addressed.
The last issue here has to do with investment. There are resources, but nonetheless, there's a huge gap. As in keeping with the recent estimates, by 2030, there will be a need of roughly $39 to $50 billion that will need to be investment in this particular sector each and every year in order to do away with poverty in the world. But as the director just said, to invest alone is not enough. It's all about the impact, return on investment, as well as the economic growth. That is a motor, a driver. If we don't have targeted approaches that are inclusive to make sure that never will there be anybody left behind, that's important. If you consider, in fact, the root plants that has increased by 40 kilos between 2012 and 2022, and for cereals, same thing, plus 20 kilos. So it means there are other underlying issues that will have to be worked on in order to do away with food insecurity issues. Has to do with purchasing power, what have you. So this is basically it. This is simply to provide you with basic information and to frame our debate today. If you don't mind, what I suggest we did today is to move on to various questions. I'll start off now by Dr. Issoufou Bawa, who's the regional director of the SILS, the regional SILS, based in Niamey. So good afternoon, Mr. Bawa, and thank you very much for having accepted to take part in this panel today. So SEALS cooperates with the Secretariat of the SWAC in order to develop government's instruments which are vital to work on these various issues pertaining to food insecurity. So the question here is the vital role of national capacity in preventing food crisis, and what ways can innovative government's instruments contribute to advancing progress in agriculture, food security, and nutrition, once again, in the region. Mr. Bawa? Mr. Bawa? From SEALS, are you there? Can you hear us, Mr. Bawa? Can you hear us, Mr. Bauer?
Oui, je vous entends
Doctor,
très bien.
can you hear us? Yes, I can hear you.
Merci, Sidi. Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to provide a contribution on the innovative governance instruments, specifically in advancing progress in agriculture, food security, and nutrition in the SWAC area. So we are working hard to fight against drought, and we're working with the Secretariat of SWAC. And regarding the network, there are in fact several initiatives that have been undertaken and launched, specifically regarding developing various governance instruments so to be better positioned to fight against food insecurity and to buttress and improve agriculture more generally. There are various efforts that have been undertaken collaboratively, specifically actions undertaken by SILS have proven fruitful. This enables us to improve and buttress capacity, to build capacity and create the necessary conditions for sustainable agriculture and food security. And as you've already know, in keeping with the process that was launched back in 1997 at the Sahel level, this enabled us to work, the SEALs together with the SWAC, to work on a framework on food security. This was developed in Mali. And this strategic framework for nutritional but also food security has then been deployed at various country levels. This is in fact a vital tool to ensure food security. This is something that has been of great use to various countries to provide their own mechanism. And little by little, things have evolved, and already back in 2015, in light of the various issues pertaining to resilience, for instance, and in keeping with definitions of resilience and priorities, in keeping with resilience in Sahel, we have worked on this in that logic. So it is something that has been deployed in various countries, and that provides the necessary tools and training in order to improve the situation. And from a political point of view, this has also been taken on board. So basically, the work undertaken by SILS, since it has been created together with various countries and together with the SWAC and various partners, we strive to improve coordination and planning of the sector. The
oui, à la
various
disposition des
tools
pays qui
have thus
facilite la
been provided
planification
to the
stratégique
countries to
et d'émerger
facilitate a
de façon
strategic
cohérente
deployment of
avec
these tools.
l'ensemble des
This has
secteurs
been done in
agricoles
a
et
cohesive and
alimentaires
consistent way
et qui
together
ont
with the
permis
food and
une meilleure
agricultural sectors
articulation,
in order to
amener les pays
better
à asseoir une meilleure
organize
articulation des
things so
politiques
that the
publiques
countries
en
can
matière de
provide
sécurité alimentaire
or
et de
actually
l'agriculture
have
et de
at
la
their
nutrition.
fingertips a better
Nous avons aussi tout
and
ce qui est de
well-anchored
mise en place des
policy in this
visions long
area.
terme avec des
Also, there's a
défis de
long-term
sécurité
vision that
alimentaire,
has been
notamment la
established.
définition, comme je l'ai
Specifically,
dit, des
we
cadres
provided
stratégiques,
a
mais aussi des
definition, a
politiques de
strategic
sécurité
framework,
agricole en
but
cohérence
also
avec les politiques
um,
communautaires
food safety
de l'espace CEDEAO et de
policies
l'espace
together with
UEMOA
this
et en synergie et en
security
cohérence avec
framework.
le cadre stratégique
So
de sécurité
this
alimentaire
is
défini
done
déjà par le CIS.
in
Il y
keeping
a tout
with
ce qui est
the
des outils de mise
framework
en
on
cohérence
food
des
security
actions,
developed by the
donc entre les
SEALs
différents ministères publics, mais
between the
aussi
various departments
l'articulation
or
avec les
ministries,
privés
but also
et l'espace
working hand in hand
communautaire pour
with the
pouvoir
private sector
asseoir
and
une
also
cohérence
community-based
d'ensemble
interventions.
dans le
So
mécanisme de
all
lutte
of these
contre la crise
various
alimentaire et la création de
parties work
conditions
together, make
de
sure everything
sécurité
is embedded,
alimentaire
and make
durable.
sure that this is all working towards the
Le
same
CILS
goal, food
a,
security.
en
Addition to
synergie
that,
avec les
SEALS,
partenaires, pu
together
donc
with various
développer
partners, has
des
developed
méthodologies et des
a
technologies de
methodology,
gestion
but also the
qui ont permis
necessarily
d'accompagner les pays tels que les
technology
plateformes de gestion
management
des données
tools in
qui jouent
order to
aujourd'hui un rôle
provide
clé dans
some
la coordination
structure to
multisectorielle
countries.
et
This
qui
is very
permet
important to ensure
d'optimiser
proper
les
coordination
interventions
between
à des
various
différents
sectors
niveaux
and
au
to
niveau des pays comme au
make the
niveau,
best
au
use
niveau régional.
possible of this coordination and
Cela a
deployment
permis
at a regional
effectivement
level.
dans la visée du
This, in
CILS
fact,
d'asseoir tout un
thanks to the
mécanisme de
SEALs,
renforcement
allowed
des
SEALs to
capacités dans la
deploy
prévention et surtout dans
capacity
l'alerte précoce.
building
Et
measures
aujourd'hui, grâce
and
aux
provide
outils
training.
développés par
And
le CILS,
today,
les crises
thanks to the
alimentaires
tools
ne
developed
surprennent
by
plus
SEALs,
les pays.
the
On
food
a
crises
désormais
are no longer a
des
surprise
outils
to countries.
très
Countries
performants tels que le cadre
can
harmonisé qui a été
perform
développé
much better
depuis
now thanks to
aujourd'hui
these
depuis
tools.
presque une
And
vingtaine
this is
d'années
something now that's been around for
et
roughly or
aujourd'hui
close to 20
capitalisé et
years.
approprié par les pays
Countries
et qui
have now taken
permet vraiment
ownership of
les
these
approches
tools. And once
holistiques
again, this
et
allows for
multisectorielles,
deployment of
une
a
approche aussi
holistic
participative,
approach,
amener l'ensemble
participative
des acteurs à
approach,
une
and
meilleure compréhension de
all
la
the various
classification
actors
des
can, in
crises,
fact,
identification
play
des
their
zones
role,
et des
and each has a
populations
role
et
to
définir les
identify
actions les plus
more
appropriées
pressure
selon les
points
zones et selon les types
and
d'actions
then
évoquées par
choose
par les pays.
the
Nous
necessary
avons
steps adapted
les
to
outils
that
d'analyse de la mesure
locality.
de la
We do
résilience,
have also
qui est
tools
une
that enable us
méthodologie
to measure resilience. This is an important
économétrique qui a été
methodology. It's an
développée
econometric
et qui
tool
a
that
permis
has been
aujourd'hui aux pays,
adopted and deployed,
certains
and this has
pays, de
enabled
pouvoir utiliser
countries,
cet outil
at least
comme
some countries,
un outil
to
d'aide à la prise de décision
use
parce qu'il
that
permet
tool
de
as an
faire
aid to
effectivement la
make
performance en
decision,
matière de résilience
as it allows to measure
dans le domaine de
performance when
la
it comes to
sécurité alimentaire et
resilience,
de
when it
la
comes to
nutrition,
food and
basé sur
nutrition security,
l'ensemble des
based, once again, based
donc des politiques ou
on
stratégies et de tout
all
l'ensemble des mécanismes,
the
des programmes
strategies
ou
and
projets mis en
policies and
place et déployés
mechanisms
par
and
les
projects
pays
and
dans le cadre de
projects
renforcement
deployed
de la
in a
capacité
given
et
country.
des capacités des populations à faire face aux crises.
And once again, this
Et
allows
c'est
to
un
measure the
outil qui
capacity
permet
of
donc
the
de
population
générer
to
un
face
indice
a
de
crisis.
performance
So
et
this
qui
is a
permet de
performance
décliner
index,
selon les
and
différents
this
types de
can be
capacités,
used depending
identifier
on the
quels
various
sont les types de
capacities.
stratégies
It
ou
allows
politiques qui
also to
sont
identify the various
les
strategies or
meilleurs
policies
appropriés
that
et
are
appliqués
best
par les pays et
suited
où est-ce qu'il y a
to
des
a given
gaps et
situation or a given
on
country.
formule des
So
recommandations pour que les pays
recommendations are then
puissent
made
améliorer les
for
conditions.
different countries in
Nous
order for
avons
those
tout ce
countries to
qui est
improve their
aussi
situation. In
des
addition,
outils de gouvernance.
we
Je
have
pense Sidi
governance
l'a
tools
rappelé, des outils de dialogue
that
politique en matière de
that
gouvernance de la
focus on
sécurité alimentaire, dont
dialogue
on a mis
on this
une
issue,
plateforme
food
régionale
safety,
et qui,
security,
avec l'ensemble des
rather.
acteurs de la
And in
région et
fact,
qui
this was
permet
done with
de faire
various
le suivi de
actors.
l'efficacité de la
Once
réponse,
again, this
mais
enables us
aussi
to
d'asseoir
then
un meilleur
determine if
mécanisme de planification centré
whether the
sur les réels
effectiveness of the
besoins
response was well suited or
des
not,
urgences. Nous avons
and
aussi
to
un autre outil
be in a
de
position to
l'évaluation de
properly
la
react in case
gouvernance
of
de la sécurité
emergencies.
alimentaire au
Now,
plan
there's
politique
also
et qui
governance
a
of
été qui est
food
déroulé au
security
pas
at a
de tous les
political
2 ans
level. This
et qui
is
permet
something that
aussi
is done every 2 years, and
d'apprécier
this
la
also enables
performance
us
des
to
pays
fully
en matière
appreciate a country's
de mise en
performance
œuvre de politiques et
when it
surtout de
comes to
politiques communautaires
implementing policies,
définies par
especially
la
community
CEDEAO
policies
et la
as
politique
defined by ECOWAS
commune définie
and
par l'UMOA et l'ensemble des cadres
based
stratégiques
on
déclinés au niveau des
a
pays.
common
Et cet outil nous
definition.
permet de
This is a
placer aussi
tool
les
that
pays en
enables
matière de
us
leur
to, in
performance
fact,
sur le plan de gouvernance de la sécurité
organize different
de la sécurité
countries
alimentaire.
by categories. This
vraiment de
is a very
dialogue au
important
niveau
tool
régional
that
et au niveau des
fosters
pays et qui
regional
permet aux
dialogue
pays
between
de se
countries of the
rendre
big
compte
region
de
and
tous les
enable
mécanismes et les
countries to
gaps en matière de
understand
collecte de
and
données
fully apprehend
et
that there
surtout
are
donc
many
de pouvoir
tools that
financer le
provide
processus de collecte de données
opportunities to
pour
collect
démontrer les
data.
performances
And
accomplies en
this in
matière
turn
de
can be used
gouvernance
in order
de la
to
sécurité
measure the
alimentaire.
government's performance when it
Nous
comes to
avons pour
measuring
ce qui est
food
aussi
uh,
des contenus
security.
depuis une
Now,
dizaine,
in
15 ans,
light of what
aujourd'hui,
we've been doing over the
l'émergence
last 10 to 15 years,
d'un
what we've
nouveau front
noticed is
de
that
questions sécuritaires
there's
qui limite
a new item
l'accès
that
à
comes into
certaines
play.
zones du fait de
There's a
des
limit to
questions
access to certain
l'insécurité
zones
qui est en
for
train
reasons
de
of
gangréner notre région depuis plus
insecurity
de 15 ans.
that
Et
has been
aujourd'hui, on a
festering
plus ou
in our
moins
region for
3
some
pôles,
15 years now.
notamment
And there are
le bassin
3
du lac Tchad,
areas around the
la zone
Chad Basin,
nord-ouest du Nigeria
northwest
et
of
la boucle
Nigeria,
de
and
partagée
Buktapuruma,
par le Niger, le Burkina et le
which
Mali.
is
Ce
in
sont les
fact
5 tiers
at
d'insécurité
the
et qui ne
cornerstone of 3
permettent pas au
different
dispositif tel
countries
que nous l'avons
in that
défini
area.
déjà une
And
bonne
these are
trentaine
problem
d'années
areas,
de
and
pouvoir collecter les données.
it is
Et sur cette
complicated,
base,
therefore,
nous
to actually
avons
collect
fait recours
data. So,
aux nouvelles
nonetheless,
technologies, aux
thanks to new
informations de
technologies,
télédétection et des
thanks
imageries
to
satellitaires à travers les produits
imaging and
d'observation de
satellite
la Terre
imagery
et qui nous
and that
permettent
kind of
aujourd'hui
new
de mettre et
technology, this
de
enables
mettre les
us
informations à
to
la disposition des
get
analystes
the
sur la
information and
base
then
de, donc,
provide
de
this
l'exploitation
information to
des
the
produits
analysts
d'observation de la Terre,
based on
de
these new
façon
technologies.
à disposer les
This way,
informations qui nous permettent de faire
information,
la
we then
cohérence de
have the
l'analyse
necessary
et de
information to provide
proposer
to perform our work,
des
our
actions appropriées
analytical work, and
dans
then
ce type
and
de
therefore
zone
suggest
inaccessible.
appropriate
Et cela depuis
um,
2022,
action
il y
in
a
those
un
areas
engagement
that are
compte
not
tenu de tout ce
accessible
qui
right
est
now.
spectre
Now, in
des crises
light
alimentaires. On a
of
passé
this
de,
food
il y a
crisis
15 ans, de
situation,
3,5
you'll
millions dans
remember
la
from
région
15
à
years ago,
aujourd'hui
3.5
presque
million people
50
affected.
millions de personnes
There's now
qui sont
50
en
million
insécurité
people
alimentaire
who
dans la
are in a
région
situation
et
of food
qui
insecurity
vont
in
donc
that same area
interpeller les décideurs
in just a
à
few
partir de
years. And
2022
this means that
sur
as
les
of
questions de
2022,
l'efficacité des
this
réponses
is a true
conjoncturelles
issue. What
qu'on
of
appelle des solutions,
the
si vous voulez,
effectiveness
transitoires
of such
et sans cohérence avec
ad
tout ce
hoc
qu'on a défini comme priorité
reaction or
résilience,
responses?
comme
So,
politique et
in light of
programme de
everything we've
développement qui
done, the
sont dans
various
les pays
policies on
et qui ne permettent
resilience,
pas donc de
etc.,
contenir
and
et de
in
diminuer
spite of
les
all of
effets
this,
de la faim et de
we
la malnutrition
cannot, in
dans la
fact,
région.
somehow
Et cela a permis, à
work
partir d'avril
in a positive
2022, un
fashion on
engagement
bringing
donc
down
qui
the
est
levels of
sorti
food insecurity.
du
So
RPCA d'avril
we
2022
do have a
pour
commitment. This was
engager
taken back in
les pays, la
2022
région
in
dans le
order to make
processus
sure
de
that the
l'assist
countries,
humanitaire
the
développement de
region, the
paix.
countries in
Ça veut
that
dire
region
comment
can, in fact,
véritablement
be
faire
mobilized. What we're looking at
la conciliation
is
entre les
how
besoins
to
d'urgence
reconcile
dans
the
le processus du
emergency
développement à
needs
moyen
and this
et long terme.
within the
Et
development
cela
process, both
est
at
un
the medium and
processus
long term.
certainement de long
So
terme que nous sommes
this
en train
is indeed
actuellement de
important, and what we're
dérouler avec
focusing on right now is the
la
long term that
contribution
we're deploying
du
right now,
réseau
thanks to the
global de
contribution
lutte contre
of
les crises
the
alimentaires et la FAO
World
et qui nous a
Network
aujourd'hui
of
permis à un certain nombre de pays,
pertaining
notamment
to
le
food
Niger, le
insecurity
Burkina,
and the
le
FAO,
Mali,
Niger,
le
Burkina,
Cameroun,
Mali,
à
Cameroon,
définir, à
to
poser le
name but a few,
diagnostic,
have in fact now come up with a
véritablement
proper
à mettre des
diagnostic
équipes de dialogue
and
et
to
avec des
come
moyens. Et
up with
progressivement, ce
teams to
mécanisme de
ensure that there
ressources, nous
is a
sommes en train
dialogue.
d'élargir
This
pour
mechanism
couvrir
right now is
l'ensemble de
also
7
being
pays qui
broadened
sont
to
affectés et les autres
all
pays
7 countries
du Golfe
that
de
are being
Guinée qui
affected,
sont plus ou
and
moins
also the other countries of
affectés
the
aussi par
Gulf
les
of
crises
Guinea,
alimentaires. Il y a
also impacted by
tout
this
ce qui
these food
est de
crises.
l'accroissement aussi de la
Now,
participation et de la
another
responsabilisation
issue that is
des
very
acteurs
important
locaux
has
dans
to
tous
do
les
with
instruments
relying
de
on
gouvernance de sécurité
local
alimentaire. Et c'est
actors
pour
and
ça
stakeholders.
aujourd'hui,
This is
que ce
why
soit dans le
today we're
réseau
in a
global au niveau du
position to
RPCA, le
actually
réseau
see
des
that
GEP de la région
these
et l'ensemble des
stakeholders are
dispositifs
now
et des
part
mécanismes
of
que
the
le CIRS
various
accompagne
networks.
au niveau des
And
pays,
this
les
allows
organisations non
for
gouvernementales, les
these
organisations de la société civile, les
stakeholders to rely
organisations des
also on
réseaux
various
des
other
organisations de
stakeholders,
producteurs sont
NGOs,
des acteurs clés
producer or
aujourd'hui
farmer
qui sont des
associations, to
acteurs
name but
de
a few.
dialogue
And these
au
are
niveau, à
key
côté des
actors, key
gouvernements, pour
stakeholders who
renforcer
now
les
work side by
capacités
side
des
with the
collectivités
governments
locales à gérer
to
les
make
politiques
sure that there's
agricoles et
capacity
alimentaires,
building,
à
make sure that
favoriser la
these issues
redevabilité
pertaining to
sociale à
food and
travers des
agriculture
plateformes de
are
dialogue
being dealt
qu'eux-mêmes
with. There
ils
is a
prennent le
dialogue,
relais
a
à
hub, a
travers donc
platform, and this is
des actions
facilitated by the
de
various
communication et de dialogue
actions were
citoyen et
undertaken
avec les
and
acteurs locaux
civic
et
dialogue with bringing
d'intégrer les
together
savoirs
all
traditionnels
actors, as well as the traditional participants, but it's opened up now to others as well. So we have various organizations, locally based organizations also now involved, and this enables us to actually make full use of the information that we can garner at that level. In fact, this new system has certainly fostered proper support provided to these various groups in the region. There's also a mobilization of resources system. There are important regional programs also that have been developed, has to do with access to water for the purpose of irrigation and agriculture. This contributes also to the defining the irrigation strategy at a regional level of the Sahel, and this also does, by ricochet, impact other countries in the area. This is a very, very important, precious development tool, and once again, this is a sustainable water management system, and to ensure that there's proper irrigation and that the water is accessible to farmers in that area. We also have mechanisms, management mechanisms, results-based systems, and also this allows us to measure the effectiveness. So basically, in a nutshell, those are the various governance instruments that we use, that we work with. Capacity building, we focused a lot on that. And this done together, SEALS and the SWAC. This, in fact, today is a toolbox that is vital, essential in evolving this situation. We try to look at how we can provide an answer quickly and embed that in the process as quickly as possible. Reinforce also the mechanism for humanitarian access and aid, etc. And this in the context of better, more inclusive governance in order to improve the lot of the people in that area. And thanks to the various tools developed, it is very important. In fact, in light of the very complex nature of the crisis, when it comes to food crisis, there's the geopolitical tensions, fragmentation when it comes to the regional solidarity. This is something new, and this is important that this be taken on board as well. Hence, important to see how we can, in fact, implement inclusive governance tools more quickly and bring together within a framework intergovernmental participation and cooperation, especially working on these very vital issues, food security and nutrition security. And there's also the whole matter of border management, but also making sure that countries behave in a collegial fashion. These are issues that we have to think, not only think, but rethink. Then there's also the issue of local stakeholders in promoting better food security at a local but also regional level. This in order to make sure that it is more appropriate and enables us to better fight against food crises, malnutrition, poor nutrition. There you have in a nutshell what I had to share with you today. Thank you very much, Doctor. Thank you very much. Obviously, you're very keen and passionate on this, and thank you very much for the highly relevant comments you've made, which in fact walked us through the historic issue on food security, nutrition, and to focus on coordination, which is at the heart of the matter, as well as the entire historic approach, which brings together the various instruments, technology, and political dialogue. Thank you very much.
Let's move on to Madam Consolata.
This is a very small word. We have collaborated successfully in the past, and I'm very happy to have you on board in this panel. So my question is, sorry, you are the regional social protection officer for FAO in Africa, covering the whole region in Africa. And my question is, as the lead of FAO's productive social protection initiatives in Africa, how can social protection instrument help prevent food crises and improve coordination amongst stakeholders to achieve better governance results? What role can innovative governance instrument play in this context? You have the floor.
Thank you very much, CD. I'm pleased to contribute to this important and timely dialogue. On behalf of Madam Bintia Stephen Chikaya, who is the FAO Program Lead for Social Protection in Africa, I will share a few reflections on how social protection can serve as an instrumental tool to prevent crises and as well strengthen governance in the Sahel and West African region. Now, as mentioned by yourself and the previous speakers, majority of the countries in West Africa and the Sahel have experienced steady economic growth in the past decades, and indeed an increase in per capita production of food was recorded. Despite this sustainable growth, as you mentioned rightfully, over 30 million people are facing moderate or severe food insecurity, a figure driven by overlapping shocks from climate change to market volatility and fragility. We also know that food security and poverty are intrinsically linked. Indeed, they are two sides of the same coin. As of 2023, the UN ECAS, UN Economic Commission for Africa, noted that over 141 million in the region were living in extreme poverty, that is on less than 2.5 USD a day. Additionally, as mentioned by my previous speakers, we also know that climate change alone accounts for over 40% of yield variability in cultivated land, further stressing agro-pastoral livelihoods and productivity. So in this context, FAO recognizes social protection as a transformative tool. It holds transformative potential to impact on food crisis. We also recognize that food crisis is multidimensional and addressing not only immediate consumption needs, but social protection also allows us to address underlying structural vulnerabilities that keep people trapped in cycles of poverty and food insecurity. Social protection presents a fundamental tool for poverty reduction, and in that essence, a cornerstone in addressing food insecurity. Social protection instruments have demonstrated positive impact across a broad spectrum of social indicators, as I mentioned, on poverty, on nutrition, on food security, and broader human capital development. Well-designed social protection systems can provide sustainable foundations for governments as duty bearers to fulfill the rights of their citizens, most critically looking at the right to food and the guarantee of basic social protection flows. In doing so, social protection contributes to more inclusive development. Now, we know social protection instruments, including conditional and unconditional cash transfers, seasonal cash transfers, cash plus approaches, in-kind and food assistance, contribute to avert hunger and malnutrition by increasing incomes at household level and enabling households to access food and smoothen their consumption. We also see instruments like public works programs, social insurance, and risk-based insurance schemes like agriculture insurance, promoting resilience building objectives and enabling economic and productive capacities of the most vulnerable, enabling them to withstand shocks and strengthening their adaptive capacity. Allow me to zero in on issues of crisis response and prevention, which are key functions of social protection systems. When designed appropriately, social protection systems enable anticipatory action before shocks. We can cushion those households from these shocks, but also timely responses to emerging food insecurity by leveraging large-scale, robust, and risk-informed mechanisms. This approach not only strengthens the strategic governance of food security and nutrition at national level, but also brings all the players on board. And we saw this during the COVID-19 pandemic, where over 200 countries invested over 800 billion in more than 1,400 social protection measures in 2020 alone. Within 1 year of the pandemic, these measures had been put in place. In terms of investment, this is significantly more than the global financial crisis of 2007 and 2008, indeed evidencing the importance of social protection systems in addressing crisis. In the region, we saw governments in Liberia leveraging the social cash transfer program to provide immediate support to beneficiaries and utilizing digital innovation systems. And I'll come back to this point at a later stage. In Togo, we saw the Novisi program launched against the existing social protection system and also leverage mobile platforms and digital IDs to reach those who are affected by the crisis. And similar responses were reported across other countries, including Mali, Nigeria, and Niger. Now, while we recognize the importance of social protection systems, we also look at the gaps. Despite this potential, coverage in West Africa and the Sahel remains low at 15.8% of the population who are covered by at least one social protection benefit. And we see large variations between member states, Cabo Verde reporting the highest coverage, while other countries leveraging much lower statistics. In terms of investments, governments are investing around 1.3% of their GDP on social protection. What does this tell us? That we need to look into why the situation is as is, but also advocate for increased investments in social protection. So far, about 13 ECOWAS member states have comprehensive social protection policies. How do we move these policies from documents into action? Remains the big question. While we look at these issues, we also recognize that around 95% of the workforce in West Africa depend on rural informal economy. Informality is a key driver of our livelihoods and our incomes and the broader GDP. Informality comes with various challenges, including limited and irregular incomes that also make it difficult to contribute to social insurance schemes and also access some forms of other forms of social protection instruments. Now, what is FAO doing to ensure that we bring social protection to the table in matters food security and nutrition? Guided by the FAO strategic framework that is anchored around 4 betters: better nutrition, better production, and better environment to achieve a better life, we play a central role in addressing the crisis through social protection. Applying a food systems approach, a food systems lens, and social protection is key. FAO supports government to design and implement inclusive, social responsive, shock responsive, and integrated social protection systems that not only focus on income support, but also efforts to build resilience and sustainable livelihoods for the most vulnerable amongst our communities. We seek to address persistent gaps of benefit inadequacy. We know that the cash transfers are not adequate to meet household needs for food and nutrition, and hence seek to layer comprehensive approaches, including cash plus, public works, and other forms of adaptive safety nets in government systems to enable immediate response to food crises, as well as long-term development goals. We also support strengthening of national capacities, bringing onto the table policymakers within agri-food systems and social protection and other social sectors, including health, WASH, and climate, to really design integrated approaches that address the risks holistically. Further, we leverage digital systems to build farmer registries and integrate them with existing social protection registries, including social registries, to expand coverage of rural farmers and those dependent on agri-food systems. Now, what recommendations do we make in this dialogue in terms of leveraging social protection systems to address food and nutrition security issues? 1, we should expand and diversify social protection coverage, scale up the coverage to reach at least the most vulnerable within the countries, but also expand program instruments to tailored non-contributory social assistance schemes for informal rural populations, especially those who are dependent on agri-food systems. These include instruments like Cash Plus, adaptive safety nets, productive safety nets, and economic inclusion programs that have been proven to be effective in delivering support to rural populations. And this has been evident both in Mali, Burkina Faso, among other countries. We should leverage social protection systems for complementary interventions on existing safety nets. Let us avoid building parallel systems, but rather link existing systems, expand them, and broaden them in response to food crisis. Further, we must address barriers to access, including simplifying eligibility determination, broadening our approaches to targeting, but also looking at registration and other administrative systems that facilitate effectiveness. Increasing public investment and fiscal space for social protection is key. We must advocate for increased investments, increased budgets, national budgets for social protection. Alternatively, and in addition to that, we can leverage other funding opportunities, for example, climate finance, as social protection is an instrumental tool in addressing climate risks. Exploring options for blended finance and public-private partnerships for economic inclusion. Broadening the scope of social protection programs demands that all the players, key stakeholders, and private sector come to the table. In support of tax reforms to expand fiscal space for social protection, we should leverage these reforms to scale up social protection programs. And this has been evidenced to work in countries across the Africa region. For example, in Egypt, where fossil fuel subsidies were used to scale up social protection programs. Point number 3, we should integrate social protection in agri-food systems and rural development strategies, recognizing that policy alignment is fundamental to address food insecurity. Issues of food insecurity are multidimensional and hence call for multi-stakeholder approaches. Efforts must be reinforced to embed social protection in national agriculture investment plans, national adaptation plans, national defined contributions for climate action, among other national frameworks, to ensure that social protection is placed at the center of the envisaged transformation. In addition to this, multi-stakeholder collaboration, coordination is key with relevant sectors including agriculture, disaster risk management, environment, and others. On the issue of governance, we recognize that building long-term resilience, for us to build long-term resilience, governance systems must evolve, and the evolution should not only focus on innovations in technology, but also how our institutions collaborate, as well as how our policies are coherent to address this issue. In line with the governance aspect, we strongly recommend that institutional capacities are strengthened, but also coordination efforts are reinforced. We should leverage and harmonize national social registries and ensure interoperability with other national registries like farmer registries. And this is happening, for example, in Senegal, where FAO has supported the development of farmer registry that will be integrated into the RNU, Social Protection Registry. We should support legal and policy frameworks in terms of enacting them, but also implementing them. Operationalizing all national social protection policies in countries in the ECOWAS region is key to addressing the food crisis. We should integrate rights-based approaches. Social protection is a human right, and so is the right to food. In addition to leveraging the ratification of conventions, including the ILO Convention 202, the African Union Protocol, and translating the ECOWAS social protection framework into implementation at country level. Finally, as I conclude, we must leverage innovations through digital solutions. We should expand digital public infrastructure, which includes social registries, farmer registries, adopting integrated registries across board to ensure that we are reaching those who are in need. Further, we should leverage innovations like e-wallets, mobile-based payments, particularly in rural areas. And we've seen this happening in Senegal and other countries during the COVID-19 pandemic, as mentioned earlier. We also saw in Ghana, Mauritius, and Mali, where the COVID-19 pandemic enabled scaling up of these integrated registries, and the data is being used to scale up interventions within social protection. We should link early warning systems to social protection for anticipatory response and also to inform vertical and horizontal expansion of social protection systems, given their immense potential to transform our food systems. And finally, We should design gender-sensitive and youth-sensitive social protection response models, tapping into the demographic dividend of youth within the social sector, but as well to transform our agri-food systems. I thank you, CD, and over back to you.
Thank you so much, dear Consolata, for this very brilliant contribution. It will be very difficult to summarize. Just three things from my side. I think one is resource mobilization, which is very key, and you mentioned a lot of options that can be explored. The second one is work for one single system at the national level. It's about breaking silos, working on the potential for coordination, synergy, collaboration, trying to streamline the institutions, the policy framework, the delivery mechanism, and use the digitalization to accelerate those processes. And last things, social protection can play a great role in food and nutrition security. And there are some key offers like the instrument that is being used, like the social registries, the delivery platform. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Consolata. Now let's move to Madam Cecilia Garza Casala. She's the Director of Cooperation for Africa, Arab countries, Asia at the Spanish Cooperation. So, Madam Cecilia, your country is supporting several food and nutrition security programs at the regional and national levels in the Sahel and West Africa region. What strategies and partnerships are key to promote inclusive investment while supporting food security and nutrition for vulnerable populations to ensure no one is left behind? You have the floor, and thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much. I do not know. I perhaps take the French. Both are accepted, I suppose.
Yes, both are accepted.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, oui, alors, je vais peut-être amener ici un peu la vision.
Let me perhaps share the vision of a cooperation agency to the table. We work in that region, so I'll share our perspective. I would like to start with some general background elements. For us, West Africa and Sahel are a priority region. For the first time, Sahel has a very special role to play. This is enshrined in our 2023 bill on cooperation for global development and solidarity. We also have this in our cooperation plan 24-27 in Spain, and we also have the Spain-Africa 25-28 strategy, a more political and global strategy with all Spanish stakeholders that work in the region and with the region.
So our engagement with the West Africa and the Sahel, this is not rhetorical talk, especially as regards Sahel. This is very much hands-on. There are concrete, specific actions. In Sahel alone, since 2017, Spanish public official ODA has trebled. And it's not just the government, it's government agencies, ministries, Spanish civil society, and decentralized cooperation. As you know, Spain is a highly decentralized country with the powerful local authorities. In any case, between 2010 and 2024, about 1 billion euros was allocated to the region, mostly on agriculture, but also efforts on women's rights and health. So how are we working in practice? The emphasis is on, of course, resilient or climate resilient architecture, integrated regional approaches, multi sectoral approaches where we try and combine agriculture, health, education, and social protection. I mean, that's what I just mentioned, but also infrastructure investment and support to women and youth, helping create jobs. We have what are called company incubators and such like. Now, how does this work? We have local authorities, we have central authorities as well. But what we have noted over the years is that it is critical to work on the regional basis. So we have CEDEAO, ECOWAS, SILS, but also the multilateral commitment is essential. I mean, we have UN agencies, but as a member of the EU, Spain also works as part of what they call the Team Europe, and there are a number of initiatives with specific countries of the Sahel for agricultural innovation, and we work with NGOs, with civil society, and a number of other players. Now, the area of rural development and food security, food and nutrition security, of course, we have our Sustainable Development 2.0 program, and that involves Spanish cooperation on all levels. So if you look at everything, financial cooperation, cooperation with the EU, multilateral, bilateral, humanitarian aid, if you look at the whole lot of projects, we're looking at about 320 million euros in projects that are running, up and running. So it's not just a strategic priority, but we also believe this is an area where Spain has acquired a significant technical expertise over the years, not just through, say, cooperation with the partner countries, of course, like development partners, but there's Spain itself has its own experience, because you have to see that Spain, and those who are in civil now can confirm this, Spain has similar climate conditions as many countries in Africa. We have little rainfall, rainfall is irregular, so there's great pressure on water supplies, on the water resources, and this pressure has been even worse. It has been worse by climate change. But in spite of these severe conditions, Spain was able to develop its own sustainable agricultural model based on 3 pillars. Of course, there's innovation, technological innovation. You have robust governance frameworks, decentralized governance frameworks, and we reinforced water basins, and there are key players in water management, but we also have public-private partnerships. I'd like to look specifically at this issue of water. We're well aware of the importance of water on all levels. Of course, water is quintessential, but what you really need is good management of water resources, because otherwise you have a huge source of vulnerability, instability, even conflict. And so this is really a critical chapter. And this is not just in Spain. I mean, we work with other countries, we find the same. We, of course, believe that water is of quintessential importance, as I was saying. The Spanish model in terms of water management is well recognized. It's an innovative program model, especially in arid and semi-arid areas, because, of course, we have decentralized management, but we also have all players involved. We have not just a logical, but a hydrological approach, looking at the full picture. I was talking about the convergence of water basins. What it is, you have public institutions that manage water supplies locally for each individual catchment area. So we look at not just administrative systems, but it's a whole political, as it were. We look at how a system is run. Water for drinking water, for hydropower, for everything. all these industries, all these sectors involving water are combined to under a single management involving all the players. And that makes it very efficient indeed. And we have acquired experience over the years, and that is what helps us being efficient with our partners in West Africa and the Sahel. And one big application is irrigation, and that is one key area of Spanish cooperation with Spain. This is part of our development programs, but it is also part of our Spain-Africa strategy. Of course, irrigation is essential for agricultural production, for regional stability. And in this context, Spain has supported the 2013 Dakar Declaration and the Dakar Plus 10 Declaration, which gives a very ambitious roadmap for the development of irrigation in Sahel countries. But as regards our own involvement in collective regional efforts, we are convinced that the future of irrigation lies in the stepping up of the energy transition, the implementation of innovative technologies, and of course, regional cooperation in transborder water resource management. I talked about financial cooperation. This is what ISID is all about. And that is, of course, a key pillar in managing our irrigation programs in the Sahel. So we are reforming, as we speak, the financial instruments of the agency. So we have a new instrument which we hope will be more flexible, which will make it possible to increase our room for maneuver in the region. We can be present on a wider line of action, more initiatives. Of course, we build on the work of financial cooperation with the Frondo program. We work there with the World Bank and the IDA fund in Senegal, in Niger, now in Mauritania. Now, these projects are, unfortunately, because of the situation in Niger, these projects have been suspended, but now we're starting something new with the World Bank and an ambitious project in the basin of the Senegal River, on both sides of the river, Senegal and Mauritania. So this is a regional integrated approach. And of course, Spain will take on board the Mauritanian side of the equation. Now, we've been working with the key regional partners. There's the Center for Renewable Energies and Energy Efficiency of ECOWAS. So there, the emphasis is on renewable energies, on energy efficiency, but this is also about digitalizing the irrigation system. So we work with ECOWAS agencies, and we've just renewed a program, an ambitious program, for the next 4 years. Now, in line with the issue of nutrition, and this is something, you know, that during the Nutrition for Growth Summit that took place in March this year, Spain pledged 400 million euros for the period 2024 to 2027. And so this is a strong signal, a strong commitment on the part of our country. But what is significant here in the rather uncertain international context, this summit made it possible to place nutrition back on the map of public policies with ambitious commitments to turn around the lives of millions of people around the world. Here you have ambitious commitments on the part of the public as well as the private sector. Now, we recognize that every euro invested in this generates something like 23 euros in wealth, in output, and of course you have to keep that huge return on investment. Now, to address food insecurity, it is essential to strengthen the nexus between humanitarian and development aid, because especially in the Sahel region, the needs are complex, they are interdependent, and what is critical is resilience. So we're both a humanitarian and a development agency, and in this capacity, our agency is well positioned to provide comprehensive approaches with immediate emergency aid and long-term development. So this can work in a bilateral framework as well as a multilateral framework. We have an example here, the Water and Food Security for Africa of FAO. We were involved in this in 2023. Now that initiative has a regional approach based on the nexus. Yeah, I believe that for the agency, for our agency, this is exactly the sort of thing we'll be focusing on. On the regional scale, of course, efforts must take on board existing policies. There's the ECOWAS of agricultural policy, that of UMEO, the Economic and Monetary Union. Of course, this plays a critical role in food security for the region. Again, from a regional viewpoint, Spain has been working with ECOWAS and has been supporting ECOWAS to strengthen the regional program of food reserves. And there again, our agency has provided 900,000 euros to support through the regional agency for ECOWAS's Food and Agriculture Agency. We provide an aid program to manage those drought-related risks, especially for traveling for nomadic farmers of West Africa. This aid program is index linked. Well, it makes it simpler to work out the amounts, but the purpose is to protect the cattle breeders when they face crisis brought about by drought, so they can replenish their feedstuffs, and we can provide both aid in kind as well as a financial support. This is a way of providing some additional tools to address these risks. These tools are additional to the existing tools. So when we refer to scaling up the tools, that's the sort of thing that should be considered. You have existing tools and we try to provide additional coverage. But of course, these programs proposed to be economically sustainable. They have to be sustainable over the long run. But in any case, we're looking at cattle breeders and nomadic farmers. We have seen that through our agency for the environmental transition, we have yet another project that will integrate this program in assistance of regional insurance, and that's African risk capacity. It's an insurance program to cover farmers and cattle breeders, but the idea is to work with the SID, our agency, and the EU. The idea is to produce a regional reserve of feedstuff, that is food for cattle. Cattle feed is something, well, we work with the ECOWAS and the EU to produce that reserve. Right, I'll leave it at that, but as a development agency, I should like to stress that it is indispensable, at least that's our assessment as a Spanish development agency. We believe that we should be committed to Sahel. What is key is coordination, partnership on all levels, and it is essential, once again, to have a regional vision. I'll leave it at that. Thank you so very much. Well, thank you, Mrs. Garcia, for this detailed presentation. I find that the overall trend is towards a lower contribution to ODA, and conversely, Spain is showing the way by stepping up its aid, and this is an upward trend. You referred to 400 million that will be mobilized between 2024 and 2027 for issues of nutrition. Another point that you've made is the priority given in West Africa to the concept of resilience, irrigation, insurance, regional reserves, food reserves, and this is very much in line with national and regional policies as are implemented by a number of partners. Of course, all partners are involved. And then you referred to the connection between humanitarian and development work. Of course, that nexus is at the heart of our work. This is a fine example of cooperation. And I'd like to say that we certainly wish you the best of luck in your endeavors.
Dr. Conrad, you are the Secretary of Global Initiative for Food Security, ACFAN, which is a new initiative. So the question is, what incentives or policy frameworks are needed to encourage private sector investment in food systems resilience, especially in fragile or underserved areas? Once again, thank you so much for your time. You have the floor.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sidi, for the kind introduction, and many greetings from Finance for Development in Seville, ongoing this week. And I'm here today with you in my capacity as Secretary General of the Global Flagship Initiative for Food Security, which is actually a secretariat hosted by the Crop Trust, an international organization based in Bonn, Germany, as a global public good for all its members. It actually started with ACFAN and the cooperation with University in Chicago and Badea, but I'm actually, based at the Crop Trust, and right now physically in Spain at FFT4. And we had actually a range of engagements with OECD lately, including actually earlier today. But before I answer the question, allow me briefly to introduce the flagship and its relevance for today's session. The flagship is a 5-year initiative that started as a partnership between the University of Chicago's Innovation Commission for Climate Change, Food Security and Agriculture, which was chaired by Nobel laureate Professor Michael Kramer, Nobel laureate in economics, with the main mission to identify and promote the scaling of cost-effective, science-based, scalable innovations that can, help millions of people getting out of hunger. And the partnership, again, between the Innovation Commission and ACFAN and Badea as members of the Arab Coordination Group. Now, the flagship itself was launched in December in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia at the UNCCD Desertification COP16 on Agri-Food Systems Day, December 5th. The overall purpose is still the same: to identify and promote the scaling of cost-effective science-based innovations, helping us to tackle hunger. We have, when we launched the initiative, we already announced the funding for the first 2 projects. One is training for rainwater harvesting in Niger, around 1 million people, and the other one is weather forecasting digital agriculture for up to 7 million people in Ethiopia. So it's really about bringing science into policy making. We have around 50 members already, so that includes governments, the 6 Gulf countries, MDBs, private sector, universities, research institutes, advocacy groups, and civil society from around the world. The idea, when I started to develop this, previously working under the guidance of Professor Michael Kramer with ACFAN and Badea, was to launch an initiative focusing on the Sahel. But, in just a matter of months and our engagement in New York during the General Assembly last year, the initiative quickly became global. And nevertheless, there's now a big political momentum with IGAD countries, the 8 IGAD countries and their leadership. We had just half a day of meetings yesterday with the IGAD leadership and other key partners here in Seville, and also this morning. And the idea is then now to move ahead with a package of investments and activities to be announced later this year, probably inshallah during the United Nations General Assembly. Now, overall, the flagship works across 3 pillars. So one is really to depoliticize SDG 2, basically, to stay out of the geopolitics as much as possible and work with anybody dedicated to food security. A core pillar is the private sector, and this then brings me to answering the question in just a few seconds. And the third pillar is a quick turnaround of funding. So the flagship is backed by a considerable commitment from the Arab Coordination Group, and where we also have the Islamic Development Bank, OPEC Fund, Saudi Fund, and others represented, and really to be impactful on the ground. Now, as I said, one key pillar is the private sector. So what is needed to encourage private sector investment in food systems resilience, especially in fragile areas? And I would argue that 8 areas need to be addressed. The first one is we need to de-risk investments for investors. So one way to do this is to use blended finance and to absorb early risks. Another way is to offer loan guarantees and insurance to protect against political or climate shocks. And then also, I think tax breaks for climate smart and resilient agriculture investments can also play a role here. Secondly, we need to create a supportive policy environment. So we need to ensure clear, stable regulations and land rights. We need to simplify permits and procedures to make it easier to invest. And we need to strengthen contract enforcement and rule of law. Third, we need to facilitate public-private partnerships, co-invest in infrastructure. That's something we had this morning the honor also to have the government of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia with us, and this was actually also part of the discussion how important infrastructure is, investing in roads, irrigation, storage, cold chains. And we need to partner on research and innovation for local and climate resilient solutions. Fourth, we need to improve the market access. We need to invest in rural transport and digital networks to connect farmers to buyers. And we need to support trade access and harmonize food safety and quality standards. A fifth area I would argue is to boost innovation and access to data. So support agri-tech startups and mobile-based advisory tools. Make climate, soil, and market data open and usable. 6, we need to expand finance for smallholder farmers, support microfinance, mobile money, and crop insurance. Encourage banks to offer tailored loans for farmers and agri-SMEs. 7, we need to promote inclusive and sustainable business, reward companies that follow ESG standards, and we need to prioritize projects that include women, youth, and local community. And this is actually a top priority for us also working with especially when it comes to donors. I mean, there are others, but the big money is coming from the Arab Coordination Group, where 70 to 80% of the investments, whether you talk about Sudan or, any country, Mauritania, etc., 70 to 80% of the investments target women and young people and even people with disabilities to work in agriculture. And then last but not least, we need to coordinate and set a clear vision. So we need to develop national strategies that clearly define the private sector's role and create multi-stakeholder platforms for coordination and trust building. So these are the 8 areas I would argue are really crucial to move ahead on this front. And I leave it here. Thank you very much.
So thank you so much, Dr. Conrad. Just one question. How do you ensure that those investments can impact the smallholder farmers? Just 2 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, so just coming back to this morning when we had, our main event during FFD4 here in Seville was you need to be inclusive and you need to have civil society with you. So we were very happy, and all the key stakeholders from whether it's from UNCCD, the Saudi government, IGAD leadership, they agree that civil society, the smallholder farmers need to be involved in the decision-making process. And that's why we, under the Global Flagship Initiative for Food Security, will have a mechanism to engage with civil society, which will be chaired by one UNCCD, actually the UNCCD CSO champion, and co-chaired by the CEO of Partners of the Americas, Mr. John McPhail, who is also here with us in Seville. That's very important. And then in addition to that, it is very likely, I'm actually very keen on that, to have an additional, let's say, work stream under the flagship of engaging with young people. And this is something that came really out of a side event that we hosted in Bonn 2 weeks ago, back to back, the UNFCCC, the Climate COP, SB62, and also your colleague from OECD was with us. We had a number of young leaders from African countries, from India, telling us basically the leadership of the flagship, where it seems you're listening to us. And, in my previous capacity, previous life, when I was working with the European Commission, and I see my former colleague, Philippe Thomas as well, I was also the co-chair of the Global Donor Platform at IFAD, where I established a mechanism to engage with young people. So because the donor community, there was simply no mechanism where the donor community is engaging with the people they are trying to target. So that's I believe is very critical, that we are inclusive and have our engage with those that are on the ground to be impactful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Alors, il nous reste environ 30 minutes. Et
So
nous
there's
avons
roughly
encore
30
trois
minutes
panélistes.
left, but we still have 3 panelists. So I do hope that we'll have the opportunity
des réactions du public.
to also give the floor to the room. So, Monsieur Philippe Thomas, you're head of the EU development framework. So here's my question. How can the EU development framework, the global gateway, it seems like it's a new trend, general trend, current trend, development increasingly is transactional in nature. So how can this EU development framework, how can it be better aligned with inclusion objectives in order to accelerate progress towards the food and nutrition security goals? So how is it that these governance tools can support inclusion prospects, assuming that's what we're striving for? So thank you very much. Thank you for these questions. Important all the more so that we hear many things, one thing, another thing. So I will do my level best to answer your question, shedding some light. And I'll try and do this as quickly as possible. Mind you, it's not an easy question. So nonetheless, I'd like to start off by saying the following. I'm rather taken aback by what we're saying is that, in fact, the EU development framework would be transactional in nature. So how can you assert that? How can you say that? Well, I've never heard that. First time I've ever heard it being qualified as transactional. I've never heard, in fact, people to buy whatever or other similar proposals. I think this will remind you of something other country, for instance. But more seriously, on a more serious note to take, the EU continues to firmly believe in multilateralism, regional integration. And I think as an EU, that's an obvious statement. And this is indeed a main driver of sustainable development. This is why we support Africa in this way and in keeping with its own development goals. And it is this very vision that we are working on defending here in Seville within the context of the FF4D forum. So clearly, any partnership means that there's also reciprocal expectations. This is nothing new. I'm talking about partnership. I'm not going to go there by saying, well, I have a solution. No, it's always important to keep in mind that it's about negotiations. It's about an agreement, a treaty. And there was the Yaoundé, Cotonou, just to name but a few. So it's been some 60 years now since there's agreements between the EU and partners, and this rests on very clear but also mutual engagement. So if this is what you're dubbing a transactional approach, fine, so be it. But I do hope that partners who, in fact, work on cooperation and development cooperation, I hope that that things are clear. Otherwise, this brings us to other questions about governance per se. So the current framework is clear. Aid is tied. So there's a sort of a an expectation of a direct return within the framework of contracts, financing agreements that we might be brought to sign with different countries. So as to the next financial framework, as of 2028, well, right now you can't say anything. The future will tell. Pure speculation. So today, it is not and is assumed increased transactional focus. No, you have to consider the increasing budget pressure on development finance. So it is true for all countries. It is true for European countries. It's true for EU countries. But it is true also when it comes to West African countries. Why? Because we all have financing constraints. We all have different priorities, other goals, what have you. And specifically, it comes to mind is the matter of security, because insecurity, unfortunately, war increasingly has become a reality. And that's the case as well on the European continent. And this means that there are consequences, dramatic consequences. Now, then there's also the shock that hit the region due to issues pertaining to development and the financing specifically of development, and specifically has to do with USAID, which is traditionally the typical pillar of such partnership, has pulled out. Now, USAID has pulled out entirely, is no longer in this contract, which basically led to many programs just shutting down overnight. And you have to consider the impact on various programs pertaining to food aid, humanitarian aid. And if you consider what happened in Chad, it was roughly 45% of foreign aid specifically for the refugees in that country that has been cut back. So there are important systems that are, have been, stopped, plug pulled. And if you consider the impact on data, because if we don't have some sort of an early warning mechanism, if we have nothing that allows us to figure out or protect what the needs might be, it's very complicated in that case to come up with some sort of governance tools. And so this means that the EU is pretty much on its own, maybe with some help from the World Bank, specifically when it comes to the capacity building issues and program, and that is also in parts supported by the World Bank. So there's a paradox behind all of this, is that we all need figures. And in fact, it is important to make sure that we all have a common basis on which rests trust, governance based on proof, on data. Now, the Americans, mind you, it's not the Americans, it's the United States of America. The American administration is now reconsidering, I guess, and this is a good bit of news because there are now signals, specific signals, for instance, FuseNet that has been kicked up again. So it's a warning system which had been cut short over the course of the beginning of the year. So this is certainly good news to see that some programs are being reactivated. Now, international cooperation on data ultimately is something that is of common interest. So this is important to understand that. There are many examples to this end, but for us, the EU, if the partnership is indeed a clear necessity, that's something that is being confirmed once again in Sevilla. That's one issue, but nonetheless, when it comes to cooperation, development cooperation is something that has to evolve. It's not as though it's there simply to finance recurring costs without ultimately changing things. And that is, in fact, what we're now seeking, looking for, is in fact some sort of a return on investment to provide sustainable development. But this is what's behind the Global Data Way. It's it's a European strategy when it comes to foreign investment, sustainable investment, with the involvement or the engagement of the private sector, because of the limited funds now on a public side. So there's other issues that have to be taken into account as well, environmental considerations. So it is important that we understand that partnerships are not a one-way street. If some partners no longer wish to contribute, that's fine, no problem. That's their choice, and that's perfectly all right. But it means that resources on our side will be funneled elsewhere. And that, I think, is important. For instance, if you consider transparency, trust, and shared values, these are important features. Now, no doors will be shut tight, permanently closed. We remain true, a true partner of SWAC, and one of the main financial partners as well, I might add. Now, in that context, a context where many historical partners have withdrawn, and if you consider also ECOWAS, so what's going on there, that some countries are reconsidering their partnership there, it means that the SWAC's role, the club's role, is all the more important, as there's several EU member states who are also SWAC members, to wit, Spain, who seems to be in a going against the usual trends right now, and has announced that its funding will increase. What's important to understand is the club, the SWAC, has always been able to adapt to situations, either at the very beginning to coordinate food aid in kind, or today to ensure that there is a regional dialogue that is maintained based on facts. And in fact, it's a neutral role, serves as a link between two parties. So it is not a transactional approach that we stand by. It is an approach focused on responsibility. We continue to invest. We're not going to throw money and at a loss. No, we are going to target what it is we are investing in, because it's important to have some sort of impact, but to build partnerships and to build sustainable partnerships where this makes sense, in order to work on food security and food resilience issues together. And I do think that the club has always known how to be a true partner, to be there and to be there when it's needed. Thank you very much. So indeed, mea culpa, I take, do you note transactional? No. You've also mentioned the various financing issues, and also different contributions to development aid, various contributions, public-private financing, in order to have a return on investment that's a win-win. So thank you very much also for your kind words when it comes to the trust you have and the faith you have in the Club du Sahel and West Africa, SWAC. And thank you very much for your trust. Thank you very much for being here with us today. We will now turn to Dr. Jean-Philippe Semoa, who's a former executive secretary of SENSAT, and this body, in fact, he worked with this body for close to 10 years, a decade. So thank you very much, Mr. Senghor, for being here with us today. And the question we have to you today is this: what are the main governance challenges your country is facing when implementing food and nutrition security policies, and how can innovative instruments help address these main governance challenges? And there's a second question: how can this, in fact, provide support to in international involvement and instruments. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, CD. So many things to say. I will try to be brief. I'm amongst the last presenters today. First of all, I'm delighted to be attending. Apologies if my internet connection isn't optimal. I prefer not to switch my camera on for now. I'm delighted to be attending this discussion, enriching discussion. I would like to thank the Sahel Club. Madame Touré, I didn't have the opportunity to meet you since the start of your mandate as the director. I would like to congratulate you and say I wish you all the best in this very important mission. As you said, CD, I have been working with the RPCA for a number of years. And in Senegal and elsewhere in the Sahel region, the issue of food security is a major challenge. It is a social one to start with, an economic challenge too, before it is a political one. You will know this, but in our countries, politics hold the functioning of our economies hostage. And, you know, there's a domino effect in our countries, and we need to take this into consideration. Now, coming to the challenge you mentioned, we could summarize things and say this. It is all about optimizing public processes for results. This was my motto as an executive secretary. I always said we need responses, we need tangible outputs, and swiftly. And the challenge of harmonization, of consistency, especially in the field, is a significant one if we want governance to be efficient. So, an efficient coordination of actions from all involved stakeholders who want to tackle food insecurity is a challenge. I usually say this to my colleagues. You have an orchestra, and all instruments need to be played in a harmonious way. If there is no one leading the orchestra, and if each play in their own way individually, then there is no musical piece. So it is challenging. Stakeholders and actors all have their role to play, and it can be difficult to bring people together and have them work together. We usually work one next to another, and I think a lot of efforts were made for a smooth coordination to happen in a country like Senegal. For an adequate coordination, you need the right tools, instruments, mechanisms. They need to be shared, understood, and we need to get working together in a coordinated fashion. In Senegal, concretely speaking, we set up a collection system that is systematic using digital means. Digitalization led to results in our country. We set up a digital platform which enables all actors to collect any form of data, all indicators we need automatically. And there's also an opportunity to have an iterative process for controls that enables people to check if there are any mistakes in the data that is uploaded. And this was a very much welcome initiative. So Bawa mentioned one of our flagship instruments earlier on. It is shared, approved, and so modernizing this tool was important for us. We managed to set up this sub-CA, which helps us save up to 55, 57, 60% of resources needed. And that is paramount. So we save up time, resources, especially in this context of resources becoming more and more lacking. So we would gladly share this with other RPCA countries and with other Sahel Club countries. We can go into more detail. Another element, this might be because of my role, but when I came from the Ministry of Agriculture, where I worked for the past 25 to 30 years, when I arrived there, I immediately said, the responses are all good and well. There are a lot of resources mobilized for collection of data, the processing of data, namely in the field of food security. But in Senegal, we have a national support program for food security. And thanks to a significant support by the European Union delegation, and I would like to thank the delegation, we managed to set up the new resilience program. And this helped us launch an initiative on resilient smallholder farming. So we basically decided that on top of the emergency responses, we needed to work on structural responses. So having economic responses to this social and humanitarian matter. We targeted regions that are the most affected by food insecurity, and we did this mapping exercise in a successful way. We know what regions are a priority. We determined where food insecurity was the biggest problem, especially there are regions where it is a permanent problem. We went to those regions. We have a unique national registry, and we've reached 1 million households, vulnerable households, and that is where we can find the beneficiaries of this resilient farms initiative. And there were women, and I can tell you, over the past years, the farms who were beneficiaries were very happy with the system in place. And I defended this initiative very strongly. Now, we are talking about farms that are a hectare large. We have a different solar system. I'd like to commend our Spanish colleague for what she said. We must use the resources we have in our country, so the solar power, and you have those facilities, and you have all commodities, and the families live there, live on those sites, and they work all the time. There are no seasons left. All seasons are production seasons if you have water and energy.
Donc, c'est également un espace où on a tous les
So
systèmes de production.
in those spaces, you have the production systems, you have a plant production system with a greenhouse. On those farms, you also have a CPAC platform. You have sheep, poultry. So there is a diversification in production means, and some systems might support other systems while things get up and running. Therefore, I believe this was a successful experience. We shared it with other countries who came to visit us, and we're trying to convince the state and have this scaled up. Scaling up is always the challenge. Some believe that those are households that require quite a high investment, $15 to $18 million per farm. You might have a family of 4 people who work all the time. So 4 permanent contracts, but the families are families of 8 to 10 people, let's say. So we have this project. You do that for 5 years in a very targeted region. The investments are there, about 25 million euros, let's say. 20,000 people are lifted out of food insecurity indefinitely, and they can lift themselves out of poverty. So those are the initiatives launched thanks to the or under the structural responses spectrum and prism. And now the state is using the initiatives to tackle food insecurity differently. Now, what about the roles of our states? We have said it. They must be a driver. If our instruments, the entities that deal with those matters, are not supported in a strong manner at a high level, then we will have a problem. We have problems. I have said this. You need a high-level support, a well-functioning coordination on top of being the one designing strategies. The state must organize all stakeholders, actors. We have tools to mobilize actors, and we need a coordination. Last year, what we did in the north of the country was, well, the Kédougou region was picked for the project. And there are food insecurity challenges, and we launched the PNR. And when the mission was being prepared in that region, and before we launched the cash distribution mission, we came across partners who were all at the same place. And as an executive secretariat, we told them, no, this is how we will proceed. You will be there, the others will be here. And by doing so, we managed to harmonize all actions. And so the Global Food Program wanted to provide support in that region. Well, other regions were, the aid was allocated to other regions, and so it broadened the scope of aid. So you need to organize and you need to regulate. Our states need to play a role in this regard. I personally strongly believe that multilateral cooperation is paramount when it comes to resources mobilization. Our states do not have enough resources, and we need a common understanding. We need good relationships with those who can support us. And honestly, we cannot continue doing the same. Some things aren't working.
sortir
so we need to accept
de nos schémas classiques
that we
pour
must
tenter de construire la résilience de nos terroirs
go
et la
different
résilience de nos
ways
ménages.
to increase the resilience of our
Je crois que
territories, of our
c'est
households.
on va dire, un disque que vous avez certainement déjà entendu, mais
Well,
nous
this
sommes
is
allés au-delà du
a
discours.
record you'll
Nous
have
sommes en
already
train
heard.
de mettre en place dans le pays une
We
nouvelle
are
dynamique
lo-
dans la modernisation
giving an
de nos
impetus, a
outils,
new dynamic in
de
the
nos
country
mécanismes,
when
mais
it comes to
également
modernizing our
dans le
tools
changement complètement
and when it comes to
de façon de voir les choses,
the change
prise en
in,
charge
in,
de la
in
sécurité
vision
alimentaire
when it
par
comes
des
to
actions concrètes sur le
tackling
terrain,
food insecurity
accompagnant cela par les
with concrete
départements
actions
qui
in
en
the
ont la
field.
charge. Le ministère de l'Agriculture est impliqué comme
And
acteur,
the
l'économie,
Ministry of
etc. Et je peux
Agriculture
vous
is
dire que
involved,
dans les
local
exploitations
governments are
familiales,
involved.
nous
I can
avons
tell
un
you,
reporting qui
in
fait que
family
toutes les
farms,
semaines, nous avons
the
des rapports
reporting
qui
mechanism
indiquent ce qui a
shows
été
us
fait, c'est quoi les
what
difficultés,
was
c'est quoi
done,
les
what the
thèmes,
challenges
pour
were.
voir
We have that
comment
in the reports,
les
and
recettes permettent aux ménages
we can see
d'aller
how
au-delà de la prise en charge des
the
questions
household
alimentaires,
revenue can help them
mais jusqu'à ce que les questions non alimentaires
overcome
soient
food
toutes
insecurity
faites.
challenges.
Donc, Sidi, je crois que j'ai voulu aller
So,
vite en
Sidi,
vous laissant
I
prendre plus
tried
de
to
choses,
be
mais
as brief as
je pourrais
possible,
répondre à des questions
but I
beaucoup
will
plus précises,
gladly
mais
answer
voilà ce que
questions
je voulais
you might
partager
have
avec vous ce
on
matin.
more specific
Merci,
aspects.
merci
This is what I
beaucoup,
wanted to
Monsieur
share.
Senghor.
Thank you
Pour
so
des
much,
raisons de temps, je
Mr.
ne vais
Senghor.
pas faire la synthèse de votre
Unfortunately, we are
intervention,
out
mais
of time, so I will
merci
not be able
beaucoup
to
quand même.
summarize everything you've
Je vais
said, but
demander
thank
votre
you.
indulgence.
Please
Faire
bear with me.
Une extension juste de 10 minutes et donner
We will
la
just
parole
ask
à
for an
Monsieur
extra
Benan
10
de la
minutes and
Mauritanie.
give the
Monsieur
floor to
Benan
Mr.
est
Benan from Mauritania.
conseiller
Mr.
technique
Benan
au
is a
ministère de
technical
l'Agriculture
advisor at the Ministry of
et il est
Agriculture,
également le CONACYLS de la Mauritanie. Alors,
and he
Monsieur
is also a
Benan,
member of
je
the
vais vous
CONACYLS in
poser la même
Mauritania.
question que Monsieur Senghor.
I will
Quels sont
ask the
les
same
principaux
question.
défis de gouvernance auxquels votre pays
What
est
are the
confronté dans la
major
mise en œuvre des
governance
politiques de
challenges
sécurité
in your
alimentaire
country when it comes to
nutritionnelle et
implementing
comment ces
food
instruments
insecurity policies,
innovants
and how are
peuvent-ils
innovative
contribuer à les
instruments
relever? Je
contributing
vous
to
remercie encore pour votre
overcoming
disponibilité. Vous
the
avez la
governance
parole. Merci.
challenges? Many thanks for being
Merci
available.
beaucoup.
You have the floor.
Je suis très honoré et flatté
Thank
de
you very
participer
much.
à
I'm
ce
honored
panel et
to take part
je
in this
remercie
panel
beaucoup les
discussion.
organisateurs.
Many thanks
Je
to
voudrais tout d'abord
the
souligner que pour
organizers.
la Mauritanie comme pour
I would like to
l'ensemble des
stress that
pays de la sous-région,
for Mauritania, as
sécurité
is the case for
alimentaire
other
est
countries
un
in the region,
problème
food
fondamental
security
et d'une
is
importance capitale car
paramount,
d'elle dépend
essential.
la survie de beaucoup de
The
populations
very survival of a lot of
en
people
Mauritanie
depends on
en
it.
général.
In
L'insécurité
Mauritania,
alimentaire touche
food
annuellement
insecurity
entre 10 et 20% de la
affects
population,
10 to
ce
20%
qui est
of the population
relativement
every year,
important et
which
marquant.
remains
C'est pour cela
significant.
que la sécurité alimentaire joue un
That
rôle
is why
fondamental dans les politiques gouvernementales.
food security is important in
Lors de la
public
dernière
policies.
restructuration du mécanisme national de gestion de la
During
sécurité
a
alimentaire
previous
nutritionnelle,
revision of
donc par la création de
national
l'équipe nationale de
mechanisms,
prévention
uh,
et de
we,
réponse
we
aux risques
launched
alimentaires et nutritionnels,
a
qui est un instrument de gouvernance regroupant l'ensemble des acteurs
prevention
multisectoriels dans un cadre
system.
unique,
We
avec une unicité de
launched a
vision
number
et de
of
programmation
actions
qui a permis
and the
d'avoir une
vision
vision
strategy
holistique
in
ou une
order to
vision
have
stroboscopique,
a
ouvrant la voie à une
holistic
appréhension
approach.
réaliste des situations et une
We
analyse
wanted to
conséquente
adapt to the
et
reality in the
consensuelle
country,
pour y apporter des réponses idoines.
and
A
we
permis
wanted
de
to
franchir de grands
have
pas dans
pragmatic
l'intégration de la nature
responses.
transversale de ce concept
And
multidimensionnel.
we
C'est-à-dire que
took
nous
the
avons
horizontal aspect of
permis
this
à tous les acteurs
challenge.
de
So
participer,
we
bien
enabled
dans
all
la
actors be involved
l'analyse de la situation,
in the
par des
analysis of the
comités
situation
techniques spécialisés,
via specialized
avec
technical committees,
la participation à la collecte des données,
via the
à travers
participation in data collection,
ce que nous appelons aujourd'hui en Britannique l'Observatoire national de la
and
sécurité
we relied
alimentaire,
on the
au sein
National
duquel tous les
Food
partenaires,
Security
aussi
Observatory,
bien publics,
as we
nationaux
call
que
it,
les
and
partenaires extérieurs de la
national and
coopération multilatérale et bilatérale
foreign actors were
collecter des données.
involved
Et à
in
travers
this
aussi
data
des
collection
outils
exercise. And we also used or relied on
tels que le cadre harmonisé.
tools
Donc,
such as the harmonized
tout cela
framework.
permet d'avoir
All of
une
that
situation globale
led to
débouchant sur
having a
des
global
analyses
situation conducive to local, regional analyses in order to set up the national response plan to food crisis.
Mais aussi, nous avons d'autres instruments nationaux.
We also have other national instruments as well. For instance, in Mauritania, as of 2020, through various departments and ministry, we have come up with a mechanism, and the purpose is to broaden social protection, to smoothen any inequalities, reinforce international cooperations, and to organize in a sequence fashion all the interventions, and also reinforce the situation for more vulnerable, the most vulnerable of among our people. So this, in order to buttress resilience, there's this agency that has been set up, and this is now a vital piece of this entire mechanism. We work on food issues, cash transfers on a regular basis, sanitary issues as well, in order to reinforce the most vulnerable among our citizens. This year, over the course of 2025, the government did use a new planning tool, which is based on the people's voice, based also on regional planning mechanisms. And in fact, this new tool managed to reinforce the access to necessary programs, specifically focusing on regional and local development. So this enabled mobilizing some 26 million euros. This is indeed a very important feature of what have we done. We have in fact built over 6,000 new centers, and in fact 3 new hospitals in departments, 33 healthcare centers, and also some 920 drilling stations. We've managed to provide additional support to other systems, increase our power capacity, and also provide electricity to several villages, and also manage to open roads in rural areas. In fact, these are all initiatives that will certainly reinforce the resilience of our population and provide better food security. Now, there are also other important governance issues that still remain to be tackled. There are technical and financial means which are still at a rudimental phase, and this makes it very difficult to take on anything more in light of the very basic systems in place. We're also confronted to other difficulties. There's the issue of a broad variety and of complex situations, and also between different infrastructural levels of government, things are complicated as well. And this translates into important insecurities and also important tensions. In Mauritania, there are many refugees, different types of refugees, not necessarily from neighboring countries, but also within the country, domestic refugees. So this creates huge pressure on our systems which are already rather limited in nature. There's also the issue of the climate, the weather, and very intense heat, floods, what have you, or very cold spells as well. So this translates into huge difficulties, and this means also that not all needs can be met. A huge tension on the logistical chain. This translates into recurring problems that we're faced with as well when we come and set up some sort of response systems. Each and every year we're faced with these issues because of a lack of specific and precise information and coverage, not to mention that data keeps on fluctuating. We do have instruments as well There's a new mission that has been set up, and a new division. In fact, we've added the issue of food sovereignty, and this new agency will also contribute to creating 2 other agencies. There's also a new a new agency that will be working on rural issues in the valley of the Senegal River. This is something that will reinforce and buttress our system. 2 mechanisms as well. One that will deal with crops next to rivers, and another one that pertains to yet another type of crop. Also introducing mechanization. All these measures will enable us to make work far smoother, especially in some areas where increasingly there is no labor for different and various reasons. Since there's also the issue in Mauritania where rivers are used to find gold, for instance. Some sort of a gold rush in Mauritania. There is such a phenomenon. And also support to different types of farmers, for watermelon, for flowers, also for rice to a lesser extent. And we're also working on other products as well. It is important to the interpreter simply would like to say that the sound is of extremely poor quality and is doing their level best to provide something. The person is reading and the sound is poor. Basically, there is a broad variety of different measures that are being undertaken together with various partners in order to work on the matter of food security. There's the EU, the Spanish aid agency, as well as GIZ, the German agency, as well as the World Bank. These are various partners that are providing support in our various initiatives. And we do hope that thanks to a dynamic work in these various areas that I have listed, that we will be in a better position to actually harness all of these new technologies, these new crops, this new work, and this will provide an answer to our food insecurity matters. There's also water, to provide enough water for our crops and for our farms. This means we have to improve our water management. In order to do so, we have recently worked on this very issue. There's also an International Institute on Rural Development that has also provided some help. So there's a broad set of mechanisms as well as private sector assistance. For instance, we've worked on this for fertilizers. We've worked with our neighbors on getting access to fertilizers, once again, to improve food production. We're also working on reducing food wastage, for instance. So there's a broad set of mechanisms that ought to allow us to improve the effectiveness of food productions and also better use of the crops. In parallel to all of this, there is another agency on food security, has created various micro projects and has come up with a mechanism to provide support to the small farmers in order to improve their techniques and in order to improve the crop yields. This is done together in close cooperation with various bilateral partners who traditionally work in this area of food security, and this would and will certainly provide important improvements in food security. This is important at several levels. First, to properly set out what the problem is, proper analysis to determine what the problem is, and then figure out what the answers to these problems would be, once again, the interpreter like to say that the sound was very poor and Mr. Benan was reading something which was not provided to the interpreter. Apologies. So, the chair, thank you very much for being available. Thank you very much for taking part in this panel, important panel. So we've gone way over time allotted. I will therefore not go through a summary of the conclusions of what was said, etc. But what I wish to do is to apologize to all of those who are here today who couldn't ask questions or interact with the speaker or panelists. However, should you have any questions, please send them on to us, and if necessary, we can also speak to you on these issues, on the questions you may have. So please do not hesitate. So without further ado, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the panelists. Thank you wholeheartedly on behalf of the director. She had other commitments, so she had to leave before the end of this meeting, before the end of this panel. And also like to take this opportunity to thank all participants. Thank you for making yourselves available for this panel. And should you have any questions, any comments, anything, please do not hesitate to speak to us or reach out to us. Now, very soon there'll be another meeting for another webinar. See you soon. Stay tuned. And thank you very much. And I do hope that you'll have a lovely evening. Thank you very much.
Merci.
Thank you.
Au revoir.
Au revoir, Sylvia.
Merci, au revoir.